Greetings, greetings, greetings. You are watching Black Thought on the M1 Network, emanating from the studios of The Basement in Memphis, Tennessee. Glad to be with you today. Glad to be having this conversation. First of all, if you want to know who this is that's talking to you, if you haven't been watching the shows, I want to invite you to go to my website, noelhutchinson.com. And you'll be able to see right there some of the content, okay? NOELHUTCHINSON.com. Go there, and it will clue you in on as to some of the things that I'm doing and have done. For example, I'm the pastor of a new church plant, Greater Works Fellowship in the city, and we meet on Sundays at 9 a.m., and we invite and encourage you to come by and check us out. So, that's about me. But now let's get into the meat of this discussion and want to bleed from some other things that I do, a radio show that I have, and bring some of that conversation here. Over the past few weeks, a lot of things have gone on that have been in the news concerning black folk. You know, you heard about the ban of Farrakhan from being on Instagram and Facebook, although it doesn't stop you, and you from posting his stuff on Facebook. And so in essence, it's just a workaround at this point. And I think personally, even if you have issues with some of the things that Minister Farrakhan has done, this whole thing was not equal in terms of how it was rolled out. White hate groups, and then you pigeonhole one figure in our community that looms large. So the other people are kind of fringe people. Farrakhan, I would dare say, whether you love him or don't love him, he is not a fringe person in African American life. He's kind of in the middle of a lot of what we do. And you always hear from him, and I think the whole community knows who he is. So for that to happen is a shame. And then there are other things here in Tennessee. Glenn Casada, who is the Speaker of the House, he has used, I guess, his quote-unquote authority to block exit of representatives when they were trying to vote on the matter. And allegedly, and I'm using this as legal language because there was witnesses to this, a state trooper on the direction of Casada in terms of keeping all the legislators in the session. Now, whoever heard of locking legislators in a room? One state trooper put his arm around the neck of one of our state representatives, G.A. Hardaway. So a lot of things are happening. Then his chief of staff, Casada, that is, did and said some insensitive things. And so with all of this happening in the news, and with all of the things gearing up, with the fact that it's election season, the fact that we have a burgeoning People's Convention getting ready to hit us in about 2 to 3 weeks, when we look at other candidates running for office. As a matter of fact, there's some folk that that have been encouraged to run. So there's a lot going on. So how do we stop being reactive and be proactive on some of this stuff? How do we get involved? So it was interesting. I was having a conversation on my radio show with Corey Strong, who is the former chairman of the Shelby County Democratic Party. And when we were talking, we said a couple of things. And then I'm going to point to something that he said, which is the basis for this conversation. We said that everybody is not necessarily going to be in the fight for equality, for social justice, for equity, not equality, equity, because when you give everybody the same thing, some people are already at a disadvantage. So giving things out equal doesn't necessarily fix the problem. But when you look at equity, how do we do it so that it's fair and balanced to everyone? That's what you aim for. So now, Everybody's not going to be in that fight. Some people are going to be in that fight regardless, and then others may come when you need the big numbers, the big fight. But other than that, they're busy raising their families. They're busy making a living. And so most people fall in that camp. They really don't care about some of the things that we even cite on this show that are extremely important. They want others to do the heavy lifting. And so I made the point, well, I agree with that. But then I said there are times in which the masses need to gather to push an issue. I'll give you an example of what I mean. When you saw the demonstrations surrounding the death of Eric Gardner, of Michael Brown, the community got together and started making the push. And there were those that were pushing the button even then. And that's what brought it to a wider audience. Same tactic used back in the civil rights days, when on television you would see the protests and you would see the fire hoses. So those things would galvanize a nation toward action, or at least get people thinking in that direction. And so how do you do that in this day and time? And Corey Strong brought up a point that I think is very credible. He basically said that when you start to galvanize people in order to do movements, a lot of times you need money. And the example he used was, if you want people, let's say for example, to go to Nashville to push an issue, you have a large amount of people that won't be able to go on their own. So now you need to get them buses. So now who's going to pay for the buses? Who's going to provide the infrastructure wherewithal to get the masses as to where they need to be? So in that discussion, I brought up, and we both agreed, the power of the Political Action Committee. And that's what I want to press right now. I want to press it because I'll give you an example. There are many people who are dissatisfied with the leadership of Berlin Boyd in District 7. For those of you who don't know, Berlin Boyd's a city council member, and I attended some of the sessions that he was chairman over in the city council. He's no longer the chairman. And I was appalled. I was especially appalled when I was at a particular session when, in response to an audience member, he said, "Your mama." I'm condensing what he said. I was there, so I didn't need a news blast to tell me. I was sitting right there when he did it, saw the context, all of that. And then there's some other questionable things even beyond that raise the question whether he's the best person for the position. But now I have some bad news for y'all. And this is why I'm bringing this up. Not necessarily against him, but just to show you the lay of the land. Number one, even though money doesn't win elections, money goes a long way to making sure elections are won. And he has raised the most money out of all the candidates in that race. Matter of fact, he's raised more money than the other candidates combined. And he's hardly spent a dime. And, he's raised money from some of the heavy hitters in Memphis. So now let's back up. Political action committees. Now, I think I have this right. According to campaign law, an individual cannot give a campaign more than $1,600. So that evens the playing field. I know what some of y'all are going to say. No, playing field's still not even because I don't have $1,600 to give anybody. I get that. But it's relatively even. So that means no one can give more than $1,600. But the workaround is the Political Action Committee that can give what they're able to give to any campaign. Plus, political action committees can run ads. Some of the sharpest, most insensitive ads that we've seen both locally and nationally, probably over the last 10 years, have not been run by the candidates themselves, but have been run by political action committees. Then, political action committee can act as a pseudo lobbyist, get folks on buses to support a cause in state government. So we could put folk on buses going to Nashville from the Political Action Committee, and it can be paid for by them. So I know Google is your best friend. I know that other means are available where you can do the research on how to put one together. But I suggest that in each neighborhood, there ought to be a political action committee. In other words, those who see the viability of their neighborhood ought to put that together. And let me say this too. In some neighborhoods, there may need to be more than one. Because let me show you how game is played. And see, I'm getting in trouble for this already. There are those that see the value of this, have already shaped the committee and say they represent a neighborhood, even when they may not be A, familiar with the neighborhood, or B, live in the neighborhood. So you got to watch that too. Now I know we're in Memphis, so that means that you have many people, for example, who no longer live in South Memphis, but who have strong ties to South Memphis. They grew up there. They went to school there. They still have family there. They go to church there. So the ties still exist. And they support things going on in the community. But understand, they don't necessarily live in South Memphis, but they have a good interest. They still have connection to the community, and so they're pro-community. But then you have others, because of business interests, hear what I'm saying, also have anchored in neighborhoods. And their agenda may be totally different than that of the residents. But the bottom line is you got to organize. And then you have to do research on the candidates. And then your PAC ought to be around the interest of the community, not the interest of a candidate. Why? Because candidates will let you down. They'll lie to get your money, and then once they get in the office, they'll do what the heck they want. So think about what I'm saying. If you want to organize so that you can do some credible things in your community, form a PAC, and then you can take donations. And it's a 501c4 organization, I believe. And you can form it, you can have dues, you can raise money, and then you can take that as leverage to help your community. Last caveat, make sure you get reputable people to be a part of it. Don't go solely on name recognition. Hate to say this to you, but we have a lot of hungry people in our midst, and they're not hungry for right. They're hungry for lucci, for money. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, not money. Money is an object. Money can be used by whoever has it. But the point is, how do you get the money? How do you love to get the money? And what do you do with the money? That's the point. And so think about what I'm saying. Think about how that would change the landscape of what's going on. Because right now, I want to talk to y'all in District 7. Right now, it looks like Berlin Boyd's going to win. Why do I say that? First of all, he's already running the district. He probably has some people he can count on to vote for him. People in Memphis tend to vote on name recognition, and the voting pool tends to be older. And older people tend to stick with habits. So for all of those reasons, he's tracking better than the 96 people trying to run against him. See, that's part of the problem. There are too many people in that race that's trying to run against him. Now, there's a couple that know how the game is played, and so they're working things so that they can have an advantage. But right now, he's the one. Well, think about what I'm saying. Organize so that you can get who you want in that seat. Now, if you want Berlin Boyd, cool. But if you don't, you need to start planning. And this goes for across the board activism. Those who have an interest in their community need to find ways, either through a political action committee, other ways, to anchor and bolster the work in their communities so that they can make a difference. You can't wait on somebody else. This is not Marvel Comics. You're not getting a superhero to come out of the sky. That's not happening. Guess what? You're the superhero. So you have to anchor your own destiny. So just want to throw out this thought to you. Now, there are those who say we can't fix our own problems. There are those who say, well, we ought to get help in fixing our problems. But guess what? I've been black all my life. Some of you have too. Some of you are students of history, and you recognize that unless we get it started, it won't happen. Now, did we get help from other quarters from time to time? Yes. But the bottom line is, many of the initiatives, the HBCUs, the churches, the Masonic orders, the Greek organizations, you name it, many of the things that exist in our community, we started it. Now, maybe at a certain point, we got some help from other quarters, but we started it, and for the most part, we run it. So think about that. Think about this ban on Farrakhan. Who runs the Nation of Islam? Black folk. We can continue on and on and on. So the bottom line is, we're going to be the ones that broker the change in our community. We can't wait on what other folk is doing, and we can't say, well, they are doing or they said. No, they said. Days are over for they said. There's some things that we must do to change our trajectory. And the thing is, we can do it. Just like I said a few shows earlier, we can move back in our neighborhoods that are falling apart and bolster them up. But the question is, do you want to make the sacrifice to do that? And for many of us, we don't want to do it. But then when we don't do it, don't complain. When others see the value, come in the neighborhood, buy it up, put coffee shops, tea shops in it, vintage clothing stores, and change the trajectory of the neighborhood. And then 10 years later, you can't even buy a kickstand in that same neighborhood. And then you get mad. They took the neighborhood over. Well, for some of us, we knew it was coming. So the question is, did we try to assist in making sure that our folks could benefit and that the boats could rise for the persons that are there? Or did we just say we're going to wait until it gets to a certain point and then move back and reap the benefits of something without trying to shape it for the good. Because understand something else. When you, and this is not anti, so understand my conversation, but when you allow someone to come into what was your space and conquer your space, then you have to live with the repercussions of their actions. They're not necessarily going to be respectful of your institutions. Matter of fact, they're not going to understand it. In places all over this nation, for example, Sunday morning is changing. In urban New York and urban DC, out in the West Coast and urban Oakland, different places, some of these major churches don't have parking lots, and people triple park their cars on Sunday morning. It's a fact of life. Cars don't get ticketed. Services are loud. Y'all know the old school church where you could hear the folks singing halfway down the street. You could hear the reverberation from the building. Well, guess what? The new residents are not acculturated to that, and they want to be able to read their New York Times in peace on Sunday morning. So they start complaining, pushing back against it. All of a sudden, tickets are being written. Culture starts shifting. Or in the case of Howard University, a man comes up to the yard with his dog. The yard is on the National Register of Historic Places. The yard that belongs to Howard University for the use of its students. He brings his dog up there. Lets the dog do his business all over the yard, defecate, pee, all of that on the yard. And when he's approached about it, he says, well, if y'all don't like it, why don't you move the school? The school that's been there since 1867, he probably ain't even been there. I know I'm getting into Ebonics, I know. He hadn't even been there maybe 5 years. And he's telling the people that own that site that's on the National Register of Historic Places, he's telling them, if you don't like what I'm doing with my dog, y'all need to move. Think about the audacity of that. So now let's equip ourselves so we can start dealing with some of this stuff. Let's equip ourselves for this political season. Let's equip ourselves so we can change the narrative. That's what I have for you today. Well, it's time for me to go. And as I go, brother man, brother, sister woman, young boy, young girl, put your mind in gear, put your thinking cap on. Peace.
Hi, I'm Deidre Malone, the host of Dialogue with Deidre. You can find us on the M1 TV network on YouTube. Subscribe and follow us. You can also find us on Facebook at M1 TV Network, Twitter, M1 TV Network 2, and Instagram, M1 TV Network 2. Please follow us so you can keep up to date with what's going on the M1 TV network with Dialogue with Deidre and Black Thought.